In today's episode of Today in World War II, the French and the British make some pretty hefty promises that they're not going to be able to keep to the Finns. The Japanese attacked the United States Navy at Pearl Harbor. The Royal Navy and the commandos conduct an incredibly brave raid in southern France and some bickering, high level bickering between Eisenhower, Montgomery, Patton, and Bradley to as far as strategy goes towards the end of the war in 1944. Let's get started. So on December 7th, 1939, Britain and France decided they were going to make some pretty hefty promises to the besieged Finnish government in the form of military aid against the Soviet Union, who had attacked at the beginning of the month. The Finns had been begging and pleading for Western powers, democracies, the Allies, to be able to reach out and help them. And I think as we chronicle what happened in the Winter War, we're going to see that there was a lot of promises made and very, very little help actually given. The Germans at this point had just signed their, Molotov-Ribbentrop pact of non-aggression. The secret codicil of that pact included Finland to be in the Soviet Union sphere of influence, so they weren't going to help. Now, they did help a little bit. They were able to surreptitiously get some arms to the Finns, which really helped them out a lot. The Swedes helped a little bit, but they were very leery of doing anything. They were just going to plant their flag on the neutrality hill and somehow thinking that this was going to stop them from or prevent them from being invaded later, either by the Soviet Union or the Nazi German government army. The parallels are quite striking if you look at what's happening in Ukraine now, although the United States and Western Europe has given much more aid to the Ukrainians than was given to the Finns, but it still wasn't enough for them to win. The same way with the Ukrainians, it was just enough to keep them bleeding. And in this case, they it just wasn't there. And it's really unfortunate that that happened. And because not only did it mean the Finns had to give up 10% of their land eventually in an armistice, but it drove them into the arms of the Germans in 1941. But the short-sightedness of Western democracies continues to amaze, fascinate, and frankly disgust me when you see what happens. I'm just a lonely blogger, if you want to call it that, video blogger. I'm not in my mom's basement. She's dead. But I just do chronicle. I chronicle what I know, and I always often think to myself, if I knew this stuff, if I know this stuff, then surely other more educated, experienced people should know this, but they don't. And I do apologize for calling you Shirley. But what I don't apologize for is requesting that you subscribe to my channel and click the little bell that will notify you whenever I drop a new video. I'm dropping these mother effers every single day because I'm passionate about this project and I want you to, do me the courtesy and of the solid of subscribing and being notified when I drop a video. Thank you. On December 7th, 1941, the long-awaited Japanese attack against the United States happened. They sent their carrier strike force, Kido Pude, which consisted of 6 fleet aircraft carriers and all their torpedo planes, their dive bombers, and their Zero fighters, and all their support, their battleships and their cruisers and the destroyer screens. And it's interesting that we had not yet broken their codes enough to know where they were going to attack. Conventional wisdom was placed on the Philippines, and they did attack the Philippines, but just not today. But they attacked. The Japanese didn't just attack Pearl Harbor; they also attacked the British and the American force and the Dutch and American forces in East Asia. But nevertheless, the main thrust, of course, was to take out the United States Navy, especially their carriers. And, I'm not going to go into huge detail about this because, I mean, it's one of the things that you can see a lot of on American TV and in the History Channel and so forth. What, it's you see a lot of Pearl Harbor, you see a lot of Normandy, but the little stuff that I like to bring up isn't shown as much, which is why I do this YouTube channel and this podcast. So in this case, uh, they were not expected. There were signs that they were there. Famously, the radar station picked up a large group of aircraft on their way. There was also a group of B-17s that were on their way from California, and so nobody could even fathom the fact that they could be attacked by the Japanese in such a manner. It was just a lazy Sunday morning, But fortunately for the United States Navy, the carriers were not there. It was just the battleships, and frankly, it was the older battleships, the post World War One or World War One battleships that, frankly, were not going to make a bit of difference in the war anyway. So the Japanese came in. They had two waves. They destroyed most of the air power the Marines and the Army Air Corps had, and the Navy had. They sank, the main battleships on Battleship Row, took out some other ships, and then there was in two attacks. Uh, it's interesting that the other blunder they made. Well, the biggest blunder was not taking out the dry docks and not taking out the oil tanks, because they made this amazingly daring and successful attack, but they choked. They choked because they really wanted to put Pearl Harbor out of action. They could have done that. Once the carriers weren't there, that at least they could have done was to destroy Pearl Harbor as a working base for 6 months to a year, and made the U.S. Navy sortie from San Diego and Washington and San Francisco. But in this case, they kept Pearl Harbor and Hawaii as a forward operating base. So, again, the Japanese made a lot of blunders in the war. This was the first and most important one. I would love for you to like my channel and leave a comment. You know about the algorithm. You know how these things work. Every time you engage with a video, the algorithm picks that up and shows it to more people, puts it in more people's feeds, and that helps me grow my channel. So please do so. I would really appreciate it. Thank you. Now, on December 7th, 1942, the Royal Navy and the commandos, they conducted an incredibly daring and brave raid in southern France in the port of Bordeaux. If you know anything about geography, I'd encourage you just to go and look this up on and just Google it, Bordeaux, and you can see that the actual harbor is not right on the ocean. You have to go a few miles up the river to get to where the ships are docked, where the port is, and it's actually 70 miles up there. So this raid was where you had British submarines dropped off these commandos, and they had, for one of a better term, like kayaks in a sense. They were called cockleshell vessels, if you want to call it that. They were basically like kayaks. And there were 10 British commandos. They were in two-man canoes, and they paddled up the river in the middle of the night with the idea they were going to attach limpet mines to the hulls of German ships. And they lost, 6 of them were disabled. 2 commandos drowned en route, but I'm sorry, 3 of the canoes, apologies, 3 of the canoes were lost. 2 commandos died, but enough got through to where they were able to put 6 limpet mines on 6 vessels, and they exploded and disabled those ships for quite a long period of time. When you think about how brave it was to even start that insane mission to begin with, knowing that the commandos had a death sentence on them, that Hitler had said and commanded that any commandos captured would be immediately executed, the bravery was unbelievable. Now, in this case, the 6 commandos were captured, they were executed, but 2 somehow managed to make it back to England. What a story. Look that up, read about it. It's an amazing example of the British and English and UK Commonwealth bravery that happened in that war. And then finally, on December 7th, 1944, there was a huge conference with the bigwigs, Eisenhower, Montgomery, Bradley, Tedder, Arthur Tedder. He was the head of the Air Forces, Allied Air Forces at the time, and some other leaders that met together, and they were discussing how they were going to break into Germany and in the war, and which group would get the priority, because you had three main theaters. You had Montgomery, who had the northern theater. You had a kind of a Canadian and American and British mixed group in the middle, and then you actually had four. You had Patton in the southern part, and you had the French. You had a few French divisions below Patton, but Montgomery was lobbying big time to be the lead, to have his group take the leading role in not liberating, I'm sorry, conquering and defeating Nazi Germany in its homeland. It turned, luckily, in my opinion, Eisenhower was made the right decision and said, no, we're not going to do that. Montgomery had balls, okay? He had no sense of awareness a lot of times, and the arrogance was beyond amazing. Even after he had completely screwed up Operation Market Garden, when Eisenhower did acquiesce to him and let him take a leading role to go into the Ruhr Valley and destroy Germany that way, and it didn't work. Montgomery still thought he should take the leading role, and Eisenhower said, "No, we're gonna just keep pushing on a wide front." Doubtful that that was the right decision either, but it was better than letting this egomaniac do it, right? So that's what that at least that was a positive outcome of that meeting. So I want to thank you today for watching this video. I look forward for you watching tomorrow's video. December heats up big time after Pearl Harbor and bringing the U.S. into the mix. So thanks a lot. I'll see you.